I've shared this before, but I believe nothing affects the life of a child more than the unlived life of their father. Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast. KDH here on the microphone in the ironyetistudios with Stephen DeSchryver.
Kevin, how's it going, bud?
Doing well, doing well.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Survived the big snowstorm.
I did. It was heavy.
Yeah.
It was really heavy. Like, it was ridiculous. It took us, I think, 4 or 5 hours to dig out because we did our neighbor and everybody.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
And it was probably up to your hips or something, probably.
Yeah. My nips. The drifts are up to my nips.
Well, you know, we were in Texas, so we just missed it from the Texas storm that they had. We missed our storm here. It was, about 82 degrees most of the time we were in Texas, so it was nice. Nothing to say on that. All right. Well, hey, I want to jump into this. You know, I texted you earlier, just a couple thoughts, and I'm going to share a quote. So this actually, it comes from Maxwell Maltz. And so Maxwell Maltz was a cosmetic surgeon, and this guy did like some amazing work, you know, through the 50s and 60s. He died in the 70s. And he would take these people that were especially disfigured with their faces and did some amazing work. And he would take the before pictures and the after pictures and he would show them to people, and people would, you know, the people that were getting, you know, the surgery he kept getting a similar response over and over and over again. And that was, you didn't do anything. Like, you literally didn't change anything. And yet, if you ask the nurses or other people in the family or anything else, they would be looking and seeing the before and after and the dramatic difference. And so, then he has this quote, and he says, ideas and actions that are contrary to a person's core belief system will not be accepted and therefore will not be acted upon. And, you know, it's amazing because they could be good ideas, they could be right ideas, they could be prosperous ideas, they could be life-changing ideas, but if they are contrary to someone's core belief system, then they're not going to be accepted or acted upon. And so he really kind of launched, I don't know, a second career, but he ended up talking quite a bit about self-image and how we see ourselves and the impact that has. So I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the importance of our self-image and the impact that our self-image has on our kids. How we see ourselves as badass dads, whether we are willing to accept it or not, has a direct impact on how our kids are going to see themselves. So that's the direction I want to take the conversation today and talk.
Okay, so just to recap a little bit. So it's people who, so they were disfigured, they had an issue with their physical appearance.
Yep.
And you would go in and do surgery and kind of get them back to somewhat whatever normal would be.
There could have been an accident, but it's people that had this long-standing disfigurement on their face, maybe as a birth defect or something like that, or some trauma that had happened as a child that they kind of grown through, but they just saw themselves as this disfigured person, especially on the face, and that they continued, even though it was totally corrected, they still, I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like the girl who's anorexic. I guess it could be a guy. And then they go, I'm still fat, I'm fat, and I'm fat. And everybody else is looking, you are not fat. Go have a cheeseburger.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow. So where do you even begin? So I'm assuming that your point being made is along the lines of how we see ourselves matters. And obviously we want to teach our sons and our daughters that matters as well. Where do you even begin, like, with your self-image? Like, and how do you know? I mean, I guess I'll ask you, how do you see yourself? Or how do you calibrate yourself to your self-image? I mean, do you have a group of friends? Do you have a best friend? Like, what does that look like?
Well, I think it's very common for guys, and myself included on this, that we can have our self-image be directed around our career. It's a super simple one. I mean, hey, I'm a teacher and a coach, or I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm an investment advisor, or I'm a cop, or I'm a Navy SEAL, or whatever it is. And so our self-image gets so wrapped up in this, and that is how we see ourselves. And I think it's important to understand that season is going to be a season. At some point, you're not going to be a teacher and a coach. At some point, you're not going to be a Navy SEAL. At some point, you're not going to be fill in the blank. At some point, someone's going to be running your business instead of you.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that day comes, and it comes sooner and catches us off guard. I mean, especially I see it all the time, specifically with coaching or teaching. You mentioned those two, that once, that is my identity. That's who I am. We would interview people all the time. And one of the interview questions is always like, how do you see yourself? How do kids refer to you? And this one guy, I'll never forget it. He's like, well, I'm a coach. Okay, well, give me more. Like, what else? What does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm coach. Okay. So are you a good coach? Are you a bad coach? Do they like you? Do they not like you?
Right.
I'm coach. He couldn't get out of that mindset, and he didn't last.
Yeah.
Because that's how he saw himself, and he couldn't break that mold. And we see it with teachers too. They're not my big thing with teachers, and I hate to keep talking about them, but they become, specifically in special education, you get into special education not because necessarily that drives you, but it's because it's who you are in your person, in your heart, that you go into that field because you feel a certain way about helping kids, which is absolutely amazing. However, that's not all you are. What happens when we had a principal who retired? The building still happened. Like the next day, someone took your place, and it's the saddest thing when you figure out that you're not as important as you think you are. The company will run by itself.
Yep.
So Stephen DeSchryver, whatever. When I leave, someone else is going to go into that spot and take over. And if my entire identity is wrapped up in that one project, I might have some issues, and I might have a hard time letting go. I know guys who still review their calendars from years ago. Like, well, see how busy I was? But you're not now.
Right,
you're not now.
Right. Yeah.
What do you have going on now? You did that. That was your past. What is next?
Yeah. Well, and I think you're exactly right. At some point, someone is going to be heading up that school. Someone's going to be running that business. And, if I can look back over the last couple of years, not only on the podcast, but, guys I've met with and everything, one of the common themes, catching guys in transition, but has been like, but who am I now? I've been special forces for all these years, and who am I now? I've been a cop for all these years. For all my buddies that are, cops, I had this conversation with them, and I was talking to Justin just recently and saying, hey, you're within a handful of years of, getting your full retirement. Who are you going to be then? You're not this elite special forces, dude, badass on the streets, who are you going to be then? And, just having those conversations. And I think just having the awareness that things are going to change. Who do I want to be now? And so, I think what's important for us is to, one, understand that we all have a self-image, but then start working on how can we expand our self-image? Because, the self-image is really the box. I don't know, maybe that's not the right analogy, but it's the rubber band that we have encapsulating who we are. And we need to stretch that rubber band, and it's important to us. And I think one of the ways that we can do that and really model for our kids is somewhat having that white belt mentality, saying that, hey, let's go try something new. And when we do that, the challenge is we're exposing ourselves. Because for many of us, I mean, come on, let's be honest now. Remember, we covered it before, but you're a man now. You're 40.
Yes.
You're a man.
Yeah.
Gundy. You're Gundy. You have a self-image, and it at some level you get comfortable in that self-image. This is who I am. This is what I do. And now to be able to expand that, to have that white belt mentality, to do some things that are outside of who you are. Like you here. You've done that with ironyetistudios.
Yeah.
2 years ago, you didn't know all this. Maybe you did, but it didn't seem like you knew everything. And you
no, not at all.
Growing.
Go back and listen to the first BadAssDads podcast. That was not produced by me. However,
right.
But it shows you how far you guys have come too. And you wouldn't have known that you were capable of that. And I think too often that we get so scared of trying something new that we never find out that what we're truly capable of. Because I'm much more comfortable sitting on a couch on a Saturday watching a football game than learning how to cross stitch. Right?
Oh yeah.
Or learning how to play chess.
Yep.
Or whatever that is. I just bring those two up because that just happened. But you're missing out on the juice, the fun parts of life. And you're not expanding your perspective too of the world. If you're just sitting there having the same conversations with the same people, and we, Stacey and I talk about this all the time, and it's kind of sad. We go back to Michigan quite often, and I swear to you, I have high school friends who you go to the same restaurant from like 98, 99, 2000, having the same conversations about the same things, about the same politics, about the same terrible sports teams. And nothing's changing. And you can tell there's something missing. And I think there's that quiet desperation piece that you talk about is there, that they're living a life of quiet desperation, hoping something changes. And sometimes you go out and you make things happen And I'm not going to say it's on purpose because you never want to invite negativity into your life. However, there are certain things that happen in people's lives that you're subconsciously running into the wall just so that there's something interesting or something changes. You might tank an entire career just so that you can change it. And it's like, oh my God, see, that wasn't my decision.
Right.
I didn't want to get fired, obviously, but now I have to go do what I always wanted to do.
Yeah. And some of that could be the sabotage, just a little self-sabotage that people go through. And, so here's the question I have for you. What would be the benefits of, I've got a 13, almost 40, he'll be 14 next month. He keeps reminding me, like, I'm 14, I'm like, you're not 14 yet. I've got an almost 14-year-old and I got a 10-year-old. What do you think the benefits to them are of me expanding my self-image? So dad expands his self-image. What's the benefit to the kid?
Well, you mimic what you know, right? And if you're never exposed to something, you may not know. I grew up in, Detroit, Michigan, very, very, very middle class. But I had the privilege of attending some schools outside of the Detroit public school system because it was awful. And I met some, very well-to-do, like, people, like the Ford family, the art. They were families in Detroit. It's not just a car company. And I never knew that people who cleaned their house. Like, that was so odd to me, but I'd never been exposed to it. Yeah. Or people who cook meals for them, or a different way of life. We got box seats to go to the Fox Theater in downtown Detroit. I had no idea. No idea. I mean, my biggest venue to that point was Old Tiger Stadium, sitting 32 rows up, and your feet are sticking to the floor, kind of a thing. But there's a different experience, and we need to expose our kids to different ways of life because they can't. The more that they get to see, the more they get to develop their own opinion about what they want to be as a young man or woman. So if you're constantly showing them that dad is trying this and dad is trying that and dad failed at this and it wasn't very good, but this is what he learned. And as long as you're engaging in those conversations, I believe they'll see what's possible within themselves. Otherwise, they're going to think that when they're, 40, that's sitting on the couch on a Saturday, and I have nothing against football, but that can't be your goal for the weekend.
Right.
You're capable of so much more.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you a direct question on this one because you really, from what I understand on your story, you watched your dad do this. I mean, he was a cop for ever.
30 years. Yeah.
30 years. And then he launches his own investment business.
At the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to see him step out. Like, and maybe I hadn't connected these dots before, but as a young man watching your dad, really have two careers. I mean, how was that? What did that do for you to be able to show you possibilities or whatever? How did that?
Well, it showed me, my mind immediately went to, I want to say how difficult, but that's not the right word. It showed me that your workday does not end 9 to 5. That sometimes you have to stay up till 2, 3 in the morning working. You don't always get 8 hours of sleep. You don't always have a cushy lifestyle. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to achieve what you want. We were, like I said, middle class growing up in Detroit. My dad wanted a boat, because he grew up in a boat. He wanted to go fishing, all that kind of fun stuff. His image of what that could look like, was already formed long before I ever showed up. So he started his own business and saved every single dime he had, and he bought a boat.
Yeah. And
then he went fishing and had a great time with it. But from that, I saw the long-term effects of what's possible, delayed gratification, having patience, but also grinding through the days sometimes when you don't want to work. And I'd be lying if I told you I didn't think about him when we were putting all this together. I mean, it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm hanging curtains, and and it's just, but nobody sees that.
Right.
You walk into Kyle's store, Fit Republic Southlands, shameless plug.
There you go.
You walk into Kyle's store and you assume that floor was always perfect. You assume that the merchandise was always that way. And Kyle just walked in, opened the key, opened the door and said, "Here we go. I have a supplement business." But that's not it.
Right.
At 3 a.m, he's grinding down the cement floor because it was awful. And I think that helped me see as a young man, as a kid growing up, that we're capable of much more. The biggest thing I learned was finance isn't fixed. Meaning if you only have a 9 to 5, you only make so much. And so it really kind of instilled that entrepreneurial spirit as well, you know?
Yeah. Well, I love that. And, one of the, I don't know, a story that I bought into a long, long time ago was the challenges that people have. We're talking a little bit about money, but, around money and the conversations that many families would have about money it wasn't really about money. It was about the lack of money and what happens to kids throughout that process. And so here's a typical scenario. Mom goes off to work, dad goes off to work, kids go to school. Mom comes back home, dad comes back home, they're tired, they're frustrated. So they've worked hard. So the kids get to see parents working hard. Okay. Then what do parents do? Are frustrated with their finances. They go into their bedroom, they close the door, and kids out in the living room hear mom and dad fighting over money. In their little minds, here's the connection that happens. Mom works hard. Dad works hard. We ain't got no money. ... Hard work does not pay off.
And it says the image that your career isn't satisfying as well, that, they only see you come home tired, exhausted, complaining about,
those bitches.
Those bitches, right? That's exactly what it is. Stacy comes home, and if I only had Stacy's, certain views on certain things, it was the worst day ever. When in fact, like 98% of it was amazing, but the 2%, if you only saw that,
yep.
It'd be difficult. And I think too often we get caught into that.
Yeah.
We don't take our kids to our career to show them what we do. How many kids could accurately describe what their parents do?
Yeah.
Show them and more than take your kid to work day, but actually have them engage with what you do.
Well, I love it. I think one of the most important things that we can do as badass dads is we can expand ourselves. And, I've shared this before, but I believe nothing affects the life of a child more than the unlived life of their father. And I think it's important for dads to be doing stuff. Whether, like your dad, here he had his full-time gig being in law enforcement. And then he had his other gig. I don't know if he started part-time or just started, doing the finance on the, but he had something else that he wanted. And, when I'm hearing that story, I'm going, he set a goal. He probably talked to you about it. He probably told stories of when he was a kid and being out in the boat. And I don't know, his dad or whomever, grandpa would take him out in the boat and they go fishing. And he wanted that. So he demonstrated to you, hey son, look, I got this goal. I got this thing I want to do. And maybe he didn't say in those exact words, but I want to do this. And then he busted his ass and went out there and made it happen. And so one of the things he showed you, he demonstrated in front of you, was that if you're willing to keep a goal in your mind and you get after it and you work hard, you'll be able to have this too. And those examples are incredibly powerful. I think back to my grandmother. So I didn't grow up with a dad, but my grandmother was an amazing, good, tough Texas granny. And so, she was an emergency room nurse. And I remember from a very young age, she would kind of moonlight part-time, like as a travel agent, because she loved to travel. And so anytime I needed something, I wanted a new pair of basketball shoes or whatever it was, her deal was with me. She goes, what is it? So it costs X number of dollars. She goes, I'll pay for half. You got to come up with the other half. So she taught me early on that if I was willing to work hard and go out there, that she would help me. She's not just going to give it to me, although I give my kids a ton of stuff, but she goes, let's figure out a way to get it done. Let's figure out a way to make that happen. And so for her, she's like, here I am raising this, kid that eats all the time and as a single woman, but she wanted to travel. So she figured out a way to be able to go and see the world and go to the Galapagos Islands and go all over Europe and go to, all over, Africa. I mean, just amazing. And she was able to do that because she had her little part-time thing. And so she expanded her self-image. And I think that's important for us as dads. So, hey, figure out, and I love the question you asked, you were talking about the guy that y'all interviewed, who are you? I'm a coach. Okay. Well, what does that really look like? And here's a great question. I asked my boys this, it's been a couple of years, but I asked them this. I said, what kind of dad am I? And you got to be careful when you ask this question, because especially kids, they'll give you the truth. And the interesting thing was, this was right when I first started coaching Jacob's football team. So this was, I guess, 2 years ago when he was in 6th grade. And he goes, well, you're a coach. I go, okay. And I asked him, I said, so what does that mean? He goes, well, sometimes you're hard on me. And he goes, but sometimes you just, you're showing me the path that I need to take and you help me to get better. I was like, okay, I can live with that. I can live with that. So I think the benefit of us expanding our self-image is it gives our kids really a clear path that they're going to be able to go, man, if dad could do it, I could do it. And they're going to be able to stand on our shoulders and see much further downrange.
Someone's going to give them perspective. It may as well be you.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for listening. Man, so many great things are happening right now. And, I'm laughing because there's transitions going on all over the place. And I'm looking forward to being able to share some of these on the microphone. Can't do it right now, but thank you guys so much. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for encouraging us. Subscribe, share, do all those great things. And we appreciate you. And be a badass dad and have a badass day. And we are out. Hey guys, I wanted to thank you so much for listening to the Badass Dad podcast. We are so excited about what's going on in 2021, and we want to encourage you to connect with us. So you can hit us up on the Facebook or Instagram at BadAssDads _podcast is where you'll find us on Instagram. And if you want to hit me directly, it is KDH at BadAssDads.org. KDH at BadAssDads.org. Man, appreciate you guys. Let's get after it.